But you just had, did somebody sign up for?
We'll start with roll call, please.
Denny.
Here.
Shelley.
Here.
Pete. Dan.
Here.
Valerie. Here. Eric.
Here.
And recognition of visitors, Mayor Dave Clark, Clerk Treasurer Lori Pontius, Mayor's Executive Assistant Brandy Coburn, Business Development Andy Brand, City Attorney Zach Leitner, City Engineer Daryl McConnell. We have Greg Balsano from Baker Tilly, Nick Steffen, Chief Doug Cox, Valerie Simmons, Austin Carmack, Ryan Shambaugh, Chief Corey Heffelfinger, and Doug Starkey. Welcome. You have in front of you the minutes from the April 1st meeting. Is there a motion?
Move to approve as presented. Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll examine the claims presented. I'm going to do these a little out of order because we have several from the same company. So let's do JPR first. We have an invoice for $560. It's invoice number 0050922 for the State Road 8 Improvement Project Engineering and Permitting. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve JPR for 0050922 for $560.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, and then the next three are from Annexer Lighting. These are for the light fixtures along the State Road 8 beautification project. There is a little credit memo, and the other two invoices appear to be for parts. Any comment on that, Daryl, or anything you want to add? Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion?
We're doing,
We can do
All at the
all
same time?
three. We just have to specify the invoice number and the amounts.
I'll make an motion that we approve invoice number 6278843-6 in the amount of $243.34, as well as invoice number 6278843-07 in the amount of $966.69, and accept a credit invoice or credit memo number 6375666-00 in the amount of $76.78.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion, a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. And you have an invoice in front of you from Leitner Law Firm for March, April, Auburn Redevelopment Commission items. Invoice number 1453 in the amount of $825. Is there a motion?
Move to approve Leitner Law Firm, invoice number 14353 for $825.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, and Pete Kemp has joined us. Thank you for being here. And you have a final invoice for Crosby Excavating for the Auburn Fire Training Facility. It's pay application number 2. I'm sorry, I said final. It's not final. This is pay application number 2 in the amount of $69,407.28. Any comments on that, Daryl?
Yeah, just a quick update.
Yeah.
The project's moving along. Yesterday, they got the curbs, concrete curbs down, which is always good to see. And it's starting to take shape, but there's quite a bit to do yet, so, but it's moving along on schedule.
Mm-hmm. Exciting. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. We pay invoice number 4946 for $69,407.28 to Crosby Excavating.
Is there-
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, payment is approved. There's no unfinished business on the agenda?
Before we move on,
Yes.
there was a invoice from Baker Tilly in the packet, but not on the agenda. Do we need to?
It will be on next month's
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
Thank you. Any unfinished business from the commission members? Okay. On to new business. Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors are here to do the annual TIF presentation, which is required by the state. And we welcome you, Greg.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Thank you. Greg Balsano, Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors, work directly with Eric Walsh and Jason Semler. I have Austin Carmack as well here with me today, assisting the city with various financial matters, including TIF. So here today, as Ms. Maltz mentioned, we are here to do the annual TIF presentation. This is a requirement amongst all redevelopment commissions throughout the state of Indiana. And is a fairly recent requirement in the last few years. This is something newer, where every year the RDC is required to invite overlapping taxing units to a public meeting where we talk about what the TIF, what's going on with the TIF, kind of the plan for the TIF, some financial numbers as far as revenues go, and kind of the impact to the taxing units. So we had helped invite those overlapping taxing units to the meeting today. And again, we're here to just kind of cover the basics about the TIF, answer any questions that you all may have. And then right after, I have a short presentation that will cover the TIF management report that was submitted back in April. That was due April 15th. That's a very small piece that I'll cover after this. So again, feel free to stop me at any time with any questions you may have, but we'll go ahead and get started with kind of just some basics. So how can TIF be used? What is TIF? We're just going to kind of cover a few slides about the general meanings of TIF here. So page 3 of this larger kind of booklet you have talks about some specific terms that you'll hear when you hear of TIF, tax increment financing. With that, there's 3 different boundaries that a TIF can have. So you have your economic development area, your tax allocation area, and then the redevelopment district. For a city or town, the redevelopment district is the same boundaries of the city or town. Where that can differ is with a county. It's the same boundaries of the county, less all of the other redevelopment districts. So again, for you guys here at the city of Auburn, think of the redevelopment district as the same boundary as the town. Now that is not where the TIF is generated and such, but that is the redevelopment district. The economic development area is where the TIFs are established, and that TIF money can be used in serving or benefiting that area. So generally TIF is capital expenditures. There's a variety of things it can be used for, but it's on projects that are in serving or benefiting the economic development area. The allocation area can be the same boundary as the economic development area, or it can be a smaller boundary. This is where the parcels lie, where the TIF is actually generated. So when a TIF is created, you have the base assessed value, which is all of the net assessed value of all the properties in that allocation area. Over time, that values hopefully will grow when economic development is continued. That incremental assessed value, the additional assessed value that has been grown, is multiplied by the tax rate to generate the TIF dollars that you all can use in that economic development area. So again, economic development area is where the money can be spent. Allocation area is where the money's generated. And oftentimes those boundaries are coterminous, or maybe you have multiple allocation areas within one economic development area. Moving to slide 4 here. So again, what is TIF? So it is a tool, as I mentioned, that captures the increases in assessed value over time. It can capture real property and designated personal property if that's the choice. Now here in Auburn, there is not a personal property designation within the TIF area. So what that is the equipment. So redevelopment commissions are able to designate personal property to be captured, or you can just capture the real property that's in those boundaries. You can capture increases in multifamily, condos if certain, commercial, industrial, and then there are residential TIF areas that can be established. That is a newer thing that's within the legislative, comments here. So that is able to capture homestead properties, whereas traditional TIF areas cannot. So that is a separate kind of TIF code that allows you to capture increases in home values, whereas your traditional TIFs cannot do that. So we'll get into your guys' area specifically at the back half of this presentation, but you guys currently have the traditional style allocation areas. So you're capturing the multifamily, the commercial, the industrial, things like that. It's not a residential housing allocation area. So the next slide here kind of shows a graphic of what I mentioned here. So again, when a TIF area is created, you have that base assessed value, that gray bar, right? That's the value of those properties at that time. The hope is that those values continue to increase, generating that teal incremental assessed value. That's what's multiplied by the tax rate to give the Redevelopment Commission its TIF money to be used to put back into the area and hopefully continue to grow that teal box. When the TIF area ends, then all of that incremental assessed value flows back through to the tax base. So the next line here, passing through assessed value, if you ever hear of the term pass through. So pass through is a decision that has to be made on or before June 15th of every single year. And it's a determination made by redevelopment commissions to say, do we have projects that we need the TIF money for? Then we're going to continue to capture the TIF. Or do we feel that we don't have any projects that we need the money for and we're passing through assessed value, right? That's the simplistic way to look at it is, are we going to give up some of the assessed value in the TIF because we don't need it all? We don't have the projects that the TIF is needed for, or are we going to capture all of it because we have a lot of list of projects, long list that we need this TIF money to be used for, whether that's pay as you go projects, whether that's debt bonding, through debt, whatever that may look like. So again, passing through AV means that you're not collecting all the TIF. Instead, you're going to give away some of that assessed value to the overlapping units because it's determined that the Redevelopment Commission doesn't need it for whatever that reason. So a common question we receive throughout the state is, does TIF take away funds from schools? And this is a question we'll get from other units as well, not just schools, but I want to comment. So school expenses and funds are largely funded at this point through the state through enrollment. So enrollment drives kind of school funding for the most part. They do collect property taxes and some income taxes, but most of it is based upon student enrollment. Their property tax related funds are levy limited, meaning that they can only grow at the maximum levy the state sets every year. And we'll get into that here at the end when we go through the impact to units. The state sets what budgets can grow by every single year.
Can I
Yes, sir.
sidetrack you?
Yep.
Just ask a question about that.
Yes, sir.
And maybe you were about to go there,
Sure.
but if they pass a levy and an extra assessed value for a school, does that come before or after TIF dollars are calculated?
So if you're saying if the RDC passed through TIF dollar, is that what you're saying? The assessed value, if they pass through assessed value?
No, if the
No.
school district passes a levy,
Oh, passes a new levy.
a bond levy,
Oh, okay. Yes, sure.
how does that calculate in or affect TIF revenue?
Yeah, great question. So if it is a non-referendum related bond issuance there, if they decide to raise their levy, and again, this is for any unit, not just schools, but if there is an increase in debt issuance and they increase their levy through debt for a project, the effect there is that whatever that levy is, whatever that debt payment is they need, is divided by the assessed value to come up with the tax rate that's needed to support that. Again, remember, TIF is a capture of assessed value. So if the TIF wasn't there, which we'll go through in more like with actual numbers at the end, that'll hopefully help explain this further. If the TIF wasn't there, there'd be more assessed value to tax, meaning a lower tax rate needed to support that debt. But if the TIF wasn't there, then as you'll see, you wouldn't have the money to do any of the projects that we're going to talk about as well. So to answer your question, it's kind of the same format. It just is the assessed value is what kind of the TIF impacts there. If it is a referendum, I do want to note TIF cannot capture that referendum. So if you're ever looking at a budget order, for example, and there's a school referendum and it has TIFs in it, you'll notice that the net assessed value of that referendum fund is higher than the other school funds because the TIF can't capture that rate. So the referendum is based upon a higher assessed value. It's the tax base of the school plus whatever the TIF is. So, and again, one last note there is about property tax caps. So TIF can impact property tax caps, but as a reminder, a lot of the TIF, when this created, is required to, most TIFs, I should say, are required to meet the but-for test. What that means is, but for establishing this TIF, this development wouldn't have happened. So if we didn't establish the TIF, the new assessed value wouldn't have occurred regardless. So that it can't be lost if it was never going to be gained. That's an argument that's made with a significant amount of TIFs when you hear that but-for test. And there is ways to help schools. For example, the redevelopment commissions are allowed to give up to 15% of revenues for specific programs for schools. There's some listed there on the right-hand side. The next slide here kind of goes into what are the steps to establish a TIF area. So there's a couple meetings that are required anytime you amend or establish a TIF area. I'll just kind of hit on a few of these. So the RDC really kicks off this process by developing a plan as well as a declaratory resolution, basically stating this is what we want to do and this is why. That then moves to the planning commission of the city to determine, does this plan coincide with the plan, overall plan for the city? It then moves to the council to affirm those actions or deny those actions, basically agreeing or disagreeing with that. It then will also go, with another hearing with the RDC, where there is a public hearing where all the units are invited to show the tax impact of establishing that TIF or amending that TIF. So it's typically a 4 to 5 meeting process. Sometimes the EDC is also involved in these processes. To any time you amend, reduce, expand, create boundaries of TIFs in any way. The next slide kind of goes into some basics of what can TIF be used on. So I kind of mentioned, generally speaking, TIF can be used on capital projects in serving or benefiting the economic development area. So there are times when projects exist outside of economic development areas, but if they are supporting that economic development area, there can be made a determination that since it's benefiting, TIF can still be used even though it's outside of the area. A lot of times we'll hear on things like public safety or fire station, different things like that. They maybe sit outside the TIF, but if they support that TIF area, we often see attorneys determine that as an allowable use. Next slide here. So just some more kind of things about TIFs. So you can do grants and loans through neighborhood development corporations. Again, we talked about the housing. There are housing TIFs out there now. You can give some money to schools if so chosen to. Again, there's a variety of things. I'd always advise you to talk with Zach and things to make sure what you're spending money on is appropriate for what the state allows. I mentioned here on slide 11, there is definitely some gray areas. I mentioned about what is determined capital versus operating. There are gray areas, and that's why I always recommend speaking with your attorney and such, working through how money is spent. Again, I'll kind of skip through here, slide 12, and go to slide 13, some key dates. So after this, we'll talk about the April 15th report that was filed and on time and to the DLGF by the April 15th. Every year, that is a report on the prior year revenues and expenses. And that is done, again, for every redevelopment commission. By June 15th, that pass-through decision has to be made, and then the notices will be delivered to all of the units following that decision. In August, the TIF neutralization process occurs, where we assist the auditor's office with determining a factor to increase the base assessed value by. So as I mentioned, that base that is determined when an area is created, that can go up or down each year depending on trending in the area. So the base is not flat over the life of the TIF area. Let's say that the general trending in a TIF area is 3%. The base will increase 3% so that the TIF is not capturing that trending. The point of that process is for the TIF to capture what it's supposed to, which is new development, new construction, changes in tax statuses. It's not supposed to capture general trending up or down. It's not supposed to be affected negatively or positively by trending. So whenever you hear the TIF neutralization process, that's what that's aiming to do. And again, every county is required to do that for the TIF areas. And we assist the county here with your guys' calculation on that TIF factor every year. Certification of net assessed values will occur. And then by December 1st, you have your TIF spending plan. Last year was the first year that had to be done. So this is done for this year. It'll be by December 125 for 2026. You'll develop a spending plan. It can match your budget. It can be different than your budget. There's really no right or wrong answer. The rule there is, though, that you can't spend on projects that are not listed in your spending plan. However, you are able to amend the spending plan if something did come up during 26. So if you had, for example, we did one for December 125. If something came up during 25 that you really needed to use TIF for, but it wasn't in your plan, you can work with Zach and you can amend that plan to incorporate that project so you can spend money on. Then at the bottom, just noting this is the annual TIF presentation. This has to be done every calendar year, just once during the calendar year. And this is that requirement today. And then just the next 3 slides, I won't hit on all these projects, but these are just various TIF project examples of TIF projects throughout the state of Indiana. So in Gas City, you have American Woodmark and Walmart Distribution. TIF was helped to use those projects there. There's a long list here of different projects. I'll go to slide 17. These are some projects that are kind of close to here in Fort Wayne. Some various projects you can see. The mixed-use development at the Lofts at Headwaters, Riverfront at Promenade Park, the Pearl, Superior Lofts, the Landing, Electric Works phases, the Data Center, Village Premier, the Bradley, Parkview Field. Again, various projects that went to support TIF. It was either used for the project or to help with. So just wanted to make some comments there. And then we're going to move in now into, I'll stop for a moment to see if anyone has any questions, but now we're going to kind of move into your areas specifically. Okay. So slide 19 here shows a map of the Northwest Economic Development Area. So you can see all the different, there's a lot of different allocation areas that we'll go into within this, but there's one economic development area that the money can be spent in. So you can see that kind of map in relation to the city here. And on the next slide, we'll go into each of the components that make this up. So we have the 2001 expansion, original area that will expire in 2031. You'll notice here that there are different lives depending on when the area was created. And that is because at the time, the TIF law has changed over years as to how long a TIF exists for. So when we established the 2001, that was a 30-year life. Later on, you'll see that there was rules about 25 years from the date of debt issuance. So it has changed over time. You guys are estimated to collect just under $1.5 million in that 2001 portion. The 2008 portion will expire in 2038, and you see that $282,640 is the estimate for this year. In 2020, there was an expansion done where you'll collect an estimated $844,920. And then more recently here in 23, there was an allocation area established called the Auburn Crossing allocation area. That's the development over by I-69, right off of the exit there. And that is expected to generate TIF for the first time this year in the amount of $151,500. Those last 2 components expire 25 years from the date any debt is issued. I do want to note, so in total, that is about just over $2.7 million. In 2024, you guys collected right around where we were estimating, around $2.4 to $2.5 million. You guys collected $2.47 million, and we were estimating 2.43. So collections came in strong in 2024. And again, we're expecting slight increase in 25, mainly due to that Auburn Crossing component coming online. I do want to note that there's a lot of talks about Senate Bill 1 and various legislation that affected the Indiana property tax and local income tax system. We are actively working internally to monitor that, review that, see how that impacts not just TIF, but the city going forward. So over the next few months, I anticipate Eric Walsh and myself will be working and seeing what the impacts are to revenues going forward as well. So I did want to note that, this is pre-SB1. In 2026, I wouldn't anticipate significant impacts in that year because those are phased in over time. But you will start seeing some impacts going forward from that legislature. So again, over the next few months, we'll definitely discuss that as you're preparing budgets and such, as we're able to kind of run those calculations further. Slide 21. So what are some projects that TIF has been used for? You could see quite a list here of some projects. So the Ensley Avenue Storm Sewer Project, the Betts Nursing Home Storm Sewer, Norland Park Storm Sewer, Auburn Essential Services Video Head End, the John Ketchum Drain Reconstruction, Downtown Streetscape that's ongoing, Lenora Lane Extension and Peckard Ditch Bridge ongoing, Northwest Sewer Separations. You can see there's a variety of projects here that TIF has been used on over the years. With that, $2.5 million roughly that you guys are collecting, here's a variety of projects that's been used on. So what is the budget? So this is just your guys' budget for this year that you guys developed in fall of last year. You can see that there's a budget of just about $3 million, varying components of capital outlays, other services and charges, professional services, and that capital outlays are various projects, including, agreements with companies, memorandums of understanding about developments and repayments and such. So again, that's kind of the budget that was established back in roughly August of last year. And then some future projects. So the variety of future projects that TIF could potentially be used for. I've got a couple pages here of those projects. So you have railroad overpass, 9th Street Cedar to Union reconstruction, various different street items, Fulton Street storm sewer, parking lots. Again, just a variety of projects you'll see on slides 23 and 24. And you can see, millions of dollars worth of projects here that are listed that, again, TIF could potentially be used for in the coming years. So again, just wanted to kind of list some of those out and show what the plan could be. So, and then the last couple slides here before we end with this presentation really goes into the impact to the overlapping taxing units. So as I've mentioned, TIF is a capture of assessed value. The assessed value multiplied with the tax rate generates your TIF dollars. Units in the state of Indiana are mostly for property taxes constrained by the maximum levy, meaning that every year the state says you can grow your budget, city, school, town, county, etc., it's usually around 4%. You can grow your budget by 4% every year, and then there are things like debt issuances that was mentioned earlier that are outside of that limit, but 4% roughly every year for like your general fund. The money that grows every year, that's your budget. And then your tax rate is determined by the amount of assessed value you have, right? So think about it as the more assessed value a unit has, the less the tax rate needs to be to support that. The lower the assessed value, you need more tax rate to support that same amount. Units can always elect to go below their maximum levy and not levy as much as they're allowed to. But again, there is that maximum kind of plus debt. So I want to go into here. This is the Auburn City Taxing District. And we're showing $10 million of incremental assessed value. So $10 million of incremental assessed value in this taxing district, you can see in that box in the middle, generates about $228,000 of TIF for you guys. So at the top, you can see this is pay 25, and you can see the city in the middle there. I'll go through the city line items. So you've got the 0.5492 is the tax rate that's needed on a $890.9 million of assessed value to generate a $4.9 million levy. So again, $4.9 million levy, what's needed, what tax rate is needed to support that? 0.5492. There are a few funds that are outside the maximum levy, and that includes the CCD, Cume Capital Development Fund, and the Fire Protection Territory Equipment Replacement Fund. So what that means is those funds that are outside of the maximum levy can increase or decrease with assessed value changes. So for funds inside the maximum levy, again, as I mentioned, assessed value going up or down changes the tax rate. For those funds, assessed value going up or down changes the revenues collected. More assessed value means you can keep your tax rate if you elect to and generate a bit more revenue, and the less, the same story. So if we said we're not going to collect $10 million of assessed value, let's say, the RDCs chose not to do that, what would happen? Well, one, The RDC would lose $228,000 of TIF to be able to do projects that we've discussed, those lists of projects that we've discussed on the prior pages. Wouldn't have that money. So what would happen instead is the $10 million of assessed value would flow through to all these units you see: the county, the city, Auburn Eckerd Library, solid waste, the airport, etc. So going back to that city fund, that first fund there, going from $890.9 million to $900.9 million. This has $10 million more of assessed value. Keeping that same $4.9 million levy means a rate reduction of 0.0061 cents to generate that same levy. For the Cume Capital Development Fund, again, that additional $10 million of assessed value generates an additional $5,000 of levy, because that fund's outside of your maximum levy. So if you go through and apply that same logic to kind of all of the units in the taxing district, the total is a rate reduction of 0.0163 cents. So going from 2.2824 to 2.2661 because of that additional $10 million. And then an additional levy of $11,640. So again, kind of in summary, the TIF lost $228,000. The flip side of that was the rate went down 0.0163 and the gross levies went up by $11,640. There can be changes in circuit breaker because of a smaller rate. There are caps in the state of Indiana, as many of you are aware, on certain properties. So there can be changes in that. That's kind of the overarching, part of TIF. So again, remember, TIF is a capture of assessed value. That $228,000 that the RDC would be losing, it's not as simple as that $228,000 is split amongst all the units, right? It's an assessed value that goes through that recalculates tax rates for the most part. And I won't go through the same kind of math on the next few pages, but you can see that we did the other couple taxing districts that the TIF lies. We did the exact same calculation. So in the Auburn Kaiser taxing district, same math, right? What would happen if $10 million was passed through? What would happen in that taxing district? And then we did the same thing on slide 27 for the Auburn Kaiser Garrett Library taxing district. So again, seeing what would happen, what TIF would be lost versus what would be the tax rate changes and such would be. So with that, again, I have a small, very short presentation to go through about the 2024 management report, but that's kind of the annual presentation. I'd be happy to cover anything in more detail. If you want me to go through those other two in more detail, I'd be happy to. But yeah, I just want to stop for a second, see if there's any questions.
I have a question about the expiration dates, just to make sure I'm
Yes, absolutely.
clear on that. The 2020, 2023, and 2024
Yes.
TIF districts, well, we don't have any debt at all that we've issued as a
Correct.
Redevelopment Commission. So currently at this time, it's my understanding there's no expiration date on those. Is that correct?
You are correct. For the 2020, the 23, and then the West Side development, we didn't touch on that one. That's a newer allocation. You won't see any money from that for 25 because it is new. But you are correct. There is no set expiration. Redevelopment commissions can always choose to end those areas early or pass through, but it does not have a set expiration. You're correct. Yeah. Once you issue debt, if you were to ever do that and pledge those revenues, that 25-year clock would start.
Thank you.
So again, that's kind of that. And again, I just want to reiterate on those last couple pages, the math is kind of done for all the units, including the libraries, the schools, the airport, et cetera. It's the same math I showed for the city. So after I get done with this, if you want me to go through anything further, I'm happy to. But again, the other presentation you have is much smaller. And this is just, thank you, Andy. This is just a report on 24. So this is not future looking. This is just what happened during 24. This is a report that was required to be submitted to the DLGF and presented to the council before April 15th, which we did do that back in mid-April, presented to the council. And I'll just hit on things quickly. I'll skip over slide 2 because we just went through that. You can see there on slide 3 all of the RDC members that were around in 2024, including the non-voting school board member, Redevelopment Commission's typically have 5 or more representatives plus a non-voting school board member. Again, slide 4, we already went through that. I won't touch base on your areas, but slide 5, we just mentioned total revenues were about $2.7 million. About 2.45 of that was TIF. The rest was kind of interest and things like that earned. Expenditures totaled $4.4 million on various projects. One of those was the final payment for the Auburn crossing loan kind of agreement there that was done that finished that development up. So that was 1.5 million of that number there. Then that is no longer outstanding. You can see there the different grants and loans that were provided in 2024 to various entities: Bowers Engineering, Crickett's 7th Street Bar and Grill, Klein's Brown House, the Siegel Group, totaling $44,000 there. And then the finances, again, about 4.4 million amongst various categories. You can see the debt service there. That's the Auburn crossing that I mentioned, other economic development agreements that you guys have. Again, various infrastructure, et cetera. And then slide 7 looks at your balance. So beginning this year, your balance was $4.2 million roughly in the TIF fund. And then moving kind of on to slide 9, that again just hits on the debt there that was outstanding, that was paid off. It was really a loan with the Auburn crossing development to finish that up. And then also in your packets, you have a parcel list. So these are the parcels and their corresponding assessed values for 2024. This is out on the DLGF site, and they will, if they haven't already, they will release this, most of this information, including the parcel list, so that the public can view it on the Gateway site. So again, that's kind of everything I have for you today. If there's a desire for me to go through anything else, sorry that took a little while. I appreciate your time today. And like I said, happy to answer any questions or going through anything further. So.
Any questions for Greg? Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
We
Thank you
appreciate
guys.
it.
Thanks for your time.
I would encourage the commission members to look through the parcel list. Part of our due diligence as a commission is to ensure that the TIF district is strategic and that the assessed value is raising, and TIF districts can be pruned and tweaked. So that's a good homework assignment for everyone. One more item under new business that we can cover today if we choose to is that, as Greg mentioned, by June 15th, we have to do our final pass-through determination for 2025 assessed value for taxes payable in 2026. And we have set our budget for the future, and we do have planned projects and obligations. So there is no excess assessed value to be passed through to the underlying taxing units. So we could go ahead and make that determination today so that the letters can go out to the taxing units right away, if we have a motion to do so.
Make a motion that we make the determination that there is not any excess pass-through that will happen in 2025.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Just for
Yes, sir.
clarification, make the determination in 2025, but it is
For-
2026.
Okay.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right. And on to announcements. Actually, Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to discuss?
No, I do not. Other than that, I'll be sending out an email just to some more information for the commission.
Excellent.
Here later today.
Okay, we'll be looking for that. Any other comments? No? All right, our next meeting is June 3rd, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
A motion and a second. Did I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.